Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On YouTube, subscribe to our channel at Grade Level Reading, where you can see all of our recordings of our previous sessions. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, follow us at Campaign for GLR. And on X, follow us at Reading by Third. We also encourage you to use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Before we get started, I just wanted to turn your attention to this slide, and I wanted to take a moment to thank our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but it also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. Thank you. As we get started, I have just a few housekeeping details to share with you. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when typing in the chat box to select everyone so that we all know who is here and can see each other's chat messages. And feel free to share your thoughts and insights throughout the duration of the webinar. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the webinar to respond to the questions you post, and our panelists will be typing out responses throughout the conversation. The webinar is also being recorded, and that recording, as well as any resources, bios, and additional information, will be sent to you in a follow-up email and to all who registered. And lastly, we'll be posting a brief poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And lastly, before we jump in, I just wanted to turn your attention to some of our upcoming webinars. Later this afternoon at 3 p.m., I hope you'll rejoin us for reflections on the first 100 days of this current administration and policies impacting children. That'll be at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Next week, on April 29th, we'll have our return to our Kindergarten Matters series with the session on effective elementary principles. On May 6th at 12:30, we'll have a Crucible of Practice Salon, which will be digging into First 10 Communities in Early Math with a focus on York, Pennsylvania. And that same day at 3 p.m., we'll have a partner webinar looking at schools as safe places beyond active shooter drills to trusting relationships. More information and registration links for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope that you can join us. And joining you now is Bonnie Howard with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you live. My name is Bonnie Howard. I'm a senior fellow with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I'd like to thank you for joining our session today using data and messaging. This is part 2, how to be an effective communicator in difficult times. We started this conversation at the end of January where we talked about how United Ways are using data and messaging to tell an impact story. Leading for Kids President David Alexander shared the research project they're doing with the Frameworks Institute around how people think and talk about important social issues. Dr. Alexander set the stage for that conversation by describing mindsets, narratives, and frames that lead to social change and introduced the idea of collective caring. We also looked at United Way's national data, which, by the way, is really strong and positive, but as a standalone may be insufficient to compel others to take action on behalf of kids and families. Sorry about that. And because I think we'd all agree that messaging in the current reality is challenging, to say the least, today we plan to delve deeper into strategies that help us create common purpose. Our ability to fundraise, inform policy and practice, and engage with our community is predicated on our ability to effectively communicate with a wide range of audiences. We hear a lot about the need for narrative change, transparency, ways to frame success that speaks to the impact this work is having, as well as the influence we're having. So today you'll learn more about how others are measuring progress, addressing the challenge, and using language and framing to create a big tent of support. So we've got a real powerhouse lined up for you today of speakers. So let me take a minute just to introduce them to you. Laurel Atkinson is Vice President of Communications and Marketing at the Aspen Institute and co-chair of the Aspen Partnership for an Inclusive Economy. She leads the in-house communications agency for public policy programs and oversees strategic and editorial direction of the Institute's marketing and brand initiatives. She also leads communications for the Aspen Partnership for an Inclusive Economy, a $30 million initiative with MasterCard and Prudential. Previously, she led congressional and public affairs at the Millennium Challenge Corporation during the Obama administration, steering global media relations, executive communications, and high-profile government initiatives, allocating over $1 billion in annual federal grants worldwide. As founder of LCA Consulting, Laurel's strategic council elevated the brands of civil rights and global development organizations, pushing their missions forward and expanding their reach. Todd Battiste is the Senior Vice President for Education and Youth Initiatives at United Way of Southeast Louisiana, where he's responsible for overseeing all education initiatives. With a career dedicated to philanthropy, Todd brings extensive experience in designing, managing, and monitoring. His commitment to the community extends beyond his professional roles, as evidenced by involvement in various boards and committees, including the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board, the Louisiana Association for the Education of Young Children, and emerging practitioners in philanthropy. Ayeola Fortune is the Vice President of the Impact Team at United Way Worldwide. She provides oversight, strategic guidance, and support to team members managing key initiatives in education, economic mobility, and health. She leads United Way's efforts to support local United Ways to integrate equity into their impact work by developing frameworks, strategies, peer learning, and training opportunities. She also leads efforts to collect and aggregate data from local United Ways to demonstrate collective impact across communities. Previously, as Senior Director of Global Impact and Results, Ayeola led the initial development of the Global Results Framework and United Way's Equity Framework. As Director of Youth Success, Ayeola led major initiatives to build network capacity to improve the number of students that graduate high school prepared for college and career. Nalisha Henry has a robust background in the nonprofit sector and currently serves as Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Greenville County. In her role, she leads strategy and operations for United Way's multi-million-dollar portfolio of community investments and initiatives, while working to advance equity and economic mobility in Greenville County through collaboration and partnership. She has several accolades to her credit, including being recognized as one of Greenville's best and brightest by the Greenville Business Magazine and as a fellow in the 2024 cohort of Change Leaders in Philanthropy. Chris Sargent is President and CEO of United Way Southeast Central Michigan. He spent most of his past 2 decades working in nonprofits. His experience includes resource development with Heart and West Michigan United Way and Michigan United Conservation Clubs. Chris managed the capital campaign for the Chef, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, Therapeutic Riding Center. It's the first therapeutic riding center built especially for the purpose of those with special needs, and has held various development and strategic leadership roles for United Way of Greater Battle Creek, where he joined in 2004. He was president and CEO of United Way Greater Battle Creek from 2009 to 2012, and he also has specialized training in community engagement, equity, and racial healing. Larry Warner is Chief Impact and Equity Officer of United Way of Rhode Island. In this role, he oversees the organization's grant-making, research and data analytics, innovation, and community outreach, 211 Helpline, Aging and Disability Resource Center, and work to advance racial equity. Before United Way, he was the Strategic Initiative Officer for Health at the Rhode Island Foundation. Dr. Warner is President of the Rhode Island Public Health Association and chairs the Governor's Council on Behavioral Health. Michael Wilkos is Vice President of Community Engagement at United Way of Central Ohio. He works with the team that develops effective strategies to improve his community and invest in programs with over 90 nonprofit partners to implement these strategies. Prior to joining United Way, Michael served as Senior Grants Officer and Director of Community Research at the Columbus Foundation. During his tenure at the foundation, he led and managed a competitive grant-making effort to stabilize and revitalize mixed-income communities. He has deep roots and experience supporting neighborhood development strategies, managing program allocations, and implementing housing and community safety programs. And finally, I think this is the longest introduction probably ever, but we got a lot of great people lined up. And here's Marjorie Sims. She's going to wind us out as our moderator for the day. Marjorie is the managing director of Ascend at the Aspen Institute, a convener for diverse leaders working across systems and sectors to build intergenerational family prosperity. In her role, she works closely with the executive director on the strategic direction of the program's vision, leads content development related to Ascend's areas of expertise, and oversees the development and implementation of all operations. She has more than 20 years of experience in advancing the status of women and families at local, state, national, and international levels, as well as expanding women's roles in leadership positions within philanthropy. And with that, I think I'm actually going to turn it right over to Laurel, who's going to get us started in this conversation.
Thanks, Bonnie. So I wanted to just start with a little bit about Aspen and how we are thinking about communicating in these difficult times. They are difficult times indeed. And then I wanted to move a little bit into some of the platforms that we're using to disseminate information across all of the various audiences that we have here at the Institute. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we're thinking about misinformation, which I think has been just a huge challenge for everybody, including all of our programs and our partners here at the Institute. And then I'll close with some different ways that we think about measuring the impact of our communications here at the Institute. So I think there's a deck. Perfect. So just to start off a bit about Aspen, I've been here for about 5 years. In some ways, because I started during literally right before the pandemic, I think I have been responsible for communicating during difficult times the entirety of my time here at the Institute. We exist as an organization to ignite human potential, to build understanding and create new possibilities for a better world. We were founded in 1949, and we drive change through dialogue, leadership, and action. Across the Institute, we are working on some of the most challenging issues facing the United States and really the world. And so I think that especially now, given what's happening with the world, our mission is more important than ever. Next slide, please. So we have a variety of assets that we use at the Institute to drive change. We have over 60 policy programs. We have dozens of fellowships. We also host hundreds of events around the country and actually globally each year. We also have a series of seminars that we do for leaders at all stages of their leadership journey. We have two different centers, one focused on rising generations and one focused on art, our Buyer Center that's on our Aspen campus in Aspen, Colorado. We also give out a number of leadership awards, and we produce hundreds of publications and reports from across our programs each year. So leadership at the Institute takes many forms. We work with leaders throughout the entirety of their leadership journey. We start with values. We really want our leaders to be rooted in humanistic principles. We help them discover and uncover and lead in their values. We really work to develop the whole person to help them grow intellectually, emotionally, ethically. We spend a lot of time really creating trusted spaces where leaders can come together and learn from each other and connect. And that's leaders across the political spectrum, across generations, across viewpoints. It's something that we do every day as we're looking for leaders who are really ready to come to the table, roll their sleeves up and get things done. And from that perspective, we also meet leaders where they are. So we're dealing with leaders who are rising teens, CEOs, leaders who are at an inflection point in their career. We help them to emphasize action. So we do a lot of work with leaders to help them take impact in their communities. We also build lifelong communities. So we have a number of networks that our leaders can stay connected through. And we're constantly adapting to the challenges of today. And that's whether it's at an issue-based level or different challenges that leaders themselves are dealing with. We also enable solutions. We have, as I mentioned, more than 60 different programs who cross um, all across different sectors, education, health, economic opportunity, technology, and society. If there is an issue facing the world, we likely have a program that deals with that issue, and that is every day working in communities to help solve those problems. I would say between leadership and events and dialogue, probably the most important thing that we do is convene. Convening is really at the heart of our mission. What we really like to do is find opportunities, whether that are closed door opportunities, whether it's large events, roundtables, for people to come and reflect and connect on what's important to them, and what it means to live what we call a good life. And we do that, as I mentioned before, across viewpoints, across generations, and across geographies. The goal of which is really to get people who want to solve problems, no matter where they're coming from, to be able to do that in a trusted environment. And so convening for us is the most important thing. And we do all of that in service of a few different impact areas. So we have 5 major impact areas that we focus on across the entirety of the Institute. Leadership, where we connect and develop leaders. Rising generations, we're really igniting the potential of young people at all stages of their development. Economic opportunity, we're really trying to ensure financial security, opportunity, and resilience. Climate and energy, and then societal trust. We're doing a lot to help strengthen democracy and really the social fabric of community within our societal trust programs. Our most recent center that we launched is the Center for Rising Generations. It's a fantastic, I think, opportunity for us to work more closely with young people, ensuring that young people have access and the ability and the tools to engage in civil dialogue, to make sure that civic engagement and leadership development become a predictable part of their journey to adulthood. We launched this center last year, and we really think that working with young people in this way will really help to make a better society. So, a couple of thoughts on appropriate platforms and technologies to manage and disseminate information. We deal with a lot of different audiences at the Institute. Within Central, we manage most of the Institute's main platforms, and then different programs have different platforms as well. But we have found that a tailored approach to platform content development is really the best way to go. And I'll talk a little bit about that platform by platform and how we're thinking about content on each of those. So the first is Instagram. We spend a lot of time on Instagram. We know that Instagram skews more Gen Z and millennials. It's a younger demographic there. It's also higher income individuals are on Instagram, and so we produce a lot of visual content, whether it's images, short videos. And they tend to perform the best on this particular platform. We do a lot of user generated content, so we have a lot of fellows across our network. We do a lot of man on the street, behind the scenes type content on Instagram as well. And we know that from all of the data that we have, the countries with the most Instagram users are India, the United States, and Brazil. So we also do a lot with our international partners to ensure that we're cross-posting content from different countries on Instagram as well. LinkedIn, we know that LinkedIn is mostly for younger professionals. It also slightly skews male. So we put a lot of posts on LinkedIn that typically focus on things like sharing industry insights. We highlight milestones on LinkedIn. We know that news and trends also perform very well on LinkedIn. And we also put a lot of thought leadership. So whether it's discussions, whether it's op-eds, blog posts, those all perform extremely well on LinkedIn. YouTube is probably our fastest growing platform. It also skews slightly male, 25 to 40 to 44, and is highly international. So we put a lot of content that reaches outside of the US borders onto YouTube for that reason. We put a lot of videos on YouTube. We get hundreds of thousands of views on our videos. We do a lot of personal storytelling. We do a lot of dialogue type videos on YouTube as well. And it's one of the platforms that we have probably invested the most in because it tends to have actually the biggest reach. Twitter, we have, as I'm sure many organizations have been dealing with Twitter over the last couple of years and really trying to figure out how to handle Twitter. We have not been posting as much there. We've actually really been spending much more time on some of the other platforms. X definitely has taken, I think, a different turn in the last few years. It's still pretty good, though, I think, for 18 to 34, if you're looking for audiences that skew male. And obviously, things like news, current events, industry updates tend to do well on X. I think it's important to note that 61% of users on X are male. I think that's that's a pretty shocking number. We are looking now at TikTok. TikTok, especially because of the younger generation that tends to be on TikTok, they tend to like the sort of funny videos, pop culture, those types of things. We do have a lot of programs who work on art in that space, and so that would do particularly well on that platform. But for any organizations that are looking for a younger demographic and to reach younger folks, definitely TikTok is the platform to be looking at in addition to Instagram. And then finally, Facebook. We are still on Facebook. I know a lot of organizations have gotten off of Facebook in the last couple of years, but we are still there. It generally is a Gen X platform, female skewing, and we do include all kinds of blog posts and things like that on Facebook that do still get a lot of really interesting engagement. So, in addition to thinking sort of about platforms, one of the other things that we're always thinking about is misinformation. I mean, given the last couple of years, I think it's been really difficult for people to really separate fact from fiction. That's getting harder, I think, in the rise of AI. We at the Institute have a program called Aspen Digital, and they have put together a committee that looks at mis and disinformation, and they've put out a number of reports that I can share with the group here. But some big, I think, takeaways from a lot of their commission reports. First, to build trust through education, to teach communities to really recognize and resist misinformation, creating resources to help leaders understand how misinformation works. And I think most importantly, in the building trust through education is supporting local news organizations. We know that the decline in local news organizations has given rise to mis and disinformation across the country. As local news organizations have shuttered their doors, have stopped hiring people, have laid people off, people around the country are now looking to national news outlets, which tend to be more cable news, which tends to be more opinion and less fact based. We know that from all of the research. So, where there are opportunities to support local news organizations, we have done that at the Institute, and we always encourage other organizations who are in a position to support local news to be able to do that. We know that local news tends to be more fact-based. And so helping to address misinformation, I think at the local level, really starts with local news organizations. We also encourage positive conversation. So using technology to really encourage respectful and thoughtful discussion and dialogue. I know that that's hard these days, but we try to do that where we can. And that for us really involves hosting conversations between diverse groups where we can use those opportunities to really build that kind of empathy and understanding that only happens and only can happen really in person when you're sitting across from somebody and really listening to what they have to say. We also focus a lot, again, on community solutions. I think we really do think that addressing misinformation starts at the community level. So where we can, we're giving support and funding to local groups, schools, libraries, hospitals, these sort of third spaces where community exists and lives and thrives, but which these types of spaces don't always tend to be funded very well. So where we can, we give support there. And then developing local tools and programs that protect people in different communities, we think is extremely important. We have a number of programs who work on capacity building in communities to ensure that people understand the difference between fact and fiction and understand how best to decipher between fact and fiction. And then finally, protecting and supporting elections. I mean, I think I would put this right up there with supporting local news organizations, just ensuring that clear and simple information about how elections work is so important because we have seen in the last couple of elections the type of misinformation that arises where there are questions around how votes are counted, how and when polling locations open or close, things like that. And a lot of that would be cleared up with just simple, clear information about how elections work, and then quickly addressing false claims about voting and election security. We have done that through Aspen Digital here at the Institute and through the Commission on Mis and Disinformation, really trying to work to ensure that the electorate understands how the election system works, yeah, so that they can then trust in it better. So, in addition to sort of the platforms, and then thinking about mis and disinformation on platforms, which obviously platforms have given, I think, also rise to misinformation. One of the things that we have been thinking about at the Institute, and we think about this every day when we're putting out all kinds of public materials, whether it's our social media posts, whether it's our brochures, whether it's our blog posts, is how to really approach language through a strategic lens. I'm one of those people who feels very strongly that language is a tool, and it can either be a tool that will create barriers or can build bridges. And so every day at the Institute, we are thinking about how we're using language to build bridges. And so some of the things I wanted to share, some of the research we've been looking at, in the past year, we hired an audience insights specialist on our team. I built that function out, and it's been really helpful for helping us think about researching public opinion, researching our audience, and really understanding the types of language that resonates with different types of audiences. So first, I think it's fair to say that in this country and really around the world, we know that trust is eroding. We've done a lot with Edelman. Edelman puts out a trust index every year, and Pew also puts out a number of different surveys. This latest one really talks about how political debate in the U.S. has become less respectful and less fact based. Again, going back to the conversation on misinformation in the past few years. I was actually shocked to read this particular survey. 84% of people say that uh, over the last several years, the tone and nature of political debate in the country has become less respectful, and 78% say it's become less fact based. As communicators, that is very, very troubling, because what we're trying to do is convey messages that actually make and compel people to take action. And so, if the country is feeling like dialogue is becoming less respectful and less fact based, we have a hard job to do, to ensure that we're putting together the types of messages and strategies that actually break through and that people can have faith in. In addition to people really feeling like um, s- dialogue has become less respectful and less fact-based, there's this rise of this phenomenon that we talk about a lot here at the Institute called affective polarization. If one of our goals at the Institute is to really bring people together, something like affective polarization makes it very, very difficult to do that. Affective polarization essentially means that you have become emotionally invested in your political ideology. And so we're now in a position in this country where not only do you disagree with people from the other side of the aisle, but you actually don't like them, right? And so there's an emotional response that you now have when you're talking about people on the other side of the political aisle. And as an organization like ours, whose goal is really to sort of hold the middle and create those tables and environments where people can come together in a trusted space and have difficult and hard conversations. Affective polarization is something that we're always thinking about because we want to ensure that we're showing up in a way that people feel safe to come and have those conversations. And so, to the extent that we can help to decrease affective polarization so that people feel actual empathy towards people that disagree with them, we are trying to do that because that's the only way that we think people can come together and actually find solutions that work for everyone. So I go back to this sort of idea that I had in the beginning, that language can either build bridges or create barriers. And one of the things that we do within our communications team as we're developing different messaging strategies is we look at uh, uh, moral foundations theory. And moral foundations theory really says that understanding your audience values is key to crafting inclusive and resonant messages. And so, if you go to the next slide, I'll show you kind of what that means. We're always looking to ensure that we are not creating messages that really resonate with one side or the other. We really want to create messages that resonate with everybody so that everybody feels included in the types of messaging that we're creating. So we look a lot at sort of progressive versus conservative coded messaging. And a lot of this is rooted, as I mentioned, in morals and values. And so one of the things that we look at is how do people on the progressive side of the aisle versus people on the conservative side of the aisle think about their own morals and values, and what does that mean for language? And so what we know based on the research is that progressives tend to really gravitate more towards language that's individualized. And what I mean by that is things like fairness and cheating, messages that talk about care or harm, right? On the other side, conservatives tend to gravitate more towards messaging that we consider binding. And that's messaging that looks at things like authority, loyalty, hard work, responsibility. And so you can see how in a messaging framework, if you're speaking to sort of one or the other, you're going to be using different words that will resonate with those different types of audiences. If you go to the next slide, please. So what I have here is a couple of different framing, both progressive and conservative, and then what we try to do at the institute, which is look at bridge building messaging. And so I'll just go through one of these, and then we don't have a lot of time. So if you're looking at something like climate change, which we do a lot of work on climate and energy, a progressive might resonate with a framework or a message that says, we must confront environmental injustice and protect marginalized communities from harm. It's a very sort of progressive coded message, right? While a conservative might lean more into talking about natural resources, God's creation, securing American energy independence. Totally different message, right? But the same issue. And so at the Institute, what we try to look at is what are those kinds of messages on an issue like this that would resonate with both without making either side feel excluded from the conversation. So something like, we all want clean air, safe water, and a healthy environment for our families and future generations. There's some progressive language there. There's some conservative language there, and it kind of meets in the middle to produce the kind of message that we hope grows our audience without narrowing our audience by seeming as if we're coming across in that message with a bias. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we think about the value and the impact of communications. We talk about this every day on our team. Communications, I think, is one of the hardest things to actually measure the impact of because you have both quantitative and qualitative methods, but some organizations definitely prefer one or the other. We look at both. So I think the next slide gets at how we think about measurement. So on the quantitative side, I think this is sort of obvious. We have what we call a lot of vanity metrics is what I actually call them, which are things like website traffic, social media metrics, engagement, shares, saves. All of that can really, I think, from a quantitative side of things, if you're interested in numbers, I think show the type of impact that your communications, messaging, and strategies can have. We also look at things like email and newsletter performance. We have a ton of different newsletters. We're looking at open rates, click-through, subscriptions. And then media coverage, we obviously look at volume, tone, and the reach of the stories that we're in. But I think what's actually more interesting on the impact side is sort of the qualitative things that we're looking at. We're always looking at, are we shaping narratives in a meaningful way? And so one of the things that we're always looking for is how are people talking about the work that we're doing, but also the issues that we work on? And are they using the same types of language that we're using? So are people referencing our work in their own conversations and their speeches or policy proposals, or are they framing an issue the way that we have framed an issue? That's a harder thing to measure quantitatively, but we think it's a really important qualitative measure of impact, especially when it comes to things like narrative change. And then we also think about action. So are people coming to our events? Are they watching our videos? Are they taking our messages? And is that sparking dialogue outside of the Institute? Do we see that in the world? Do we see that on social media? Do we see it in the news? And or is it prompting action, and specifically in communities? Because as I said before, we really think that communities are the way to make the most and longest lasting impact on some of these issues. So we're always looking at measuring the value and the impact of our communications in and on communities.
Thank you so much, Laurel. That was such a rich conversation and is truly one of the reasons why I'm so proud to work at the Aspen Institute, because of colleagues like you. So deeply appreciate that. So we have a few minutes for some questions from the audience, and there have been a few that have come through the Q&A. And so I'm just going to tick through them if that's okay with you. And then if I have the opportunity to ask a question at the end, I will. So first of all, this is from Jessica Lewis. How do you define misinformation, or how does the Aspen Institute define misinformation?
So we define misinformation as information that we know is factually inaccurate. We deal a lot in factually inaccurate information that our media team has to go and correct the record, if you will. And so that's one way that we think about misinformation. Disinformation generally has some malicious intent behind it. And so our Aspen Digital team is always sort of looking at the intent behind what's being distributed and disseminated to try to get at, is it just factually inaccurate, or is it intentionally inaccurate?
Wonderful, thank you. And so another question, this is from Catherine Cooney, and you touched on this already, but maybe just elaborate it a little bit more. Can you tell us how Aspen supports local news organizations?
Sure. So we do that again through our Aspen Digital program that does a lot of work directly funding local news organizations in communities where we think that that's important. And we also do a lot of thought leadership around the importance of funding local news organizations. So I think both of those are extremely important, the direct funding, but also continuing to make the case for why local news organizations are important. And they're important beyond just mis and disinformation. That's how I talked about it sort of in this conversation. But they have such value beyond even that. And so we have found that making that case publicly, has been extremely helpful in getting additional funding for local news organizations and communities.
Wonderful, thank you. And this is from Ellie Bullard, and this is pretty straightforward. What is the source of the charts on the language is rooted in morals and values slide?
Yeah, so moral foundations theory is an entire framework, and I'm happy to share links to that if people are interested in sort of digging into how moral foundations theory works. And it's all based in survey data and psychological data around the types of words that resonate with different self-identified audiences. And so they have developed these charts based on that. And they also have charts that will sort of tell you what's the language that's in the middle. So where can conservatives and progressives from a messaging standpoint meet in the middle to think about language that sort of works for both. So for a communications person, it's extremely helpful framework, because you can run sort of your own communications through this lens of, okay, based on these words that resonate more with progressives or conservatives, or that is what we consider bridge building language. Are my materials sort of meeting that standard? If that's my goal, if my goal is sort of broaden my audience, am I actually doing that using bridge building language in my public materials?
Wonderful, thank you. And looks like you're getting a lot of requests in the chat to share
Sure.
the link. So
Yes,
really popular
absolutely.
there. And so this next one is from Alan Gutman, and it is, when was the Threat to Democracy poll conducted? The results may not reflect changes to our democracy in the past 4 months.
Right, right. No, I think it was 2023. So I think they might be, I don't think that they would have changed dramatically since then, but they may have moved even further into the trenches of where they were. So it might be even an even sharper or higher number of people feeling like misinformation is on the rise. Political dialogue is no longer fact-based at all, I think some people would say, and political discourse is on the decline. So yes, I think that those numbers might be higher now. They were pretty high in 2023.
Yeah. And this is a question from Samantha Martin. It's a little bit complex here, I think, is that how do we measure and report on quantitative value and impact? So not the qualitative, but the quantitative.
Yes. So we have developed at the Institute a metrics dashboard. And I'm not sure if that's something that if I have a link, I will share it with people. But we have developed a metrics dashboard, which essentially aggregates across all of your different digital channels, all of your likes, shares, impressions, media hits, media mentions, newsletter open rates, subscription numbers, all of that into one dashboard so that we have sort of a one-stop shop here at the Institute that we can look at, and we can offer that to programs as well. And so we generally will put that into some sort of report. We have report builders, like templates that we have that we can then share with funders, we can share with our board, we can share with program directors if they're interested. So a lot of the quantitative data, because it's numbers, it's easy for us to sort of visualize using charts and graphs and things like that. And then we also marry that with anecdotal stories and data on the qualitative side. So that you have a really comprehensive picture of how the communications, either the messaging or the strategy, is resonating across the various audiences.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laurel. There are so many more questions in the chat. The longer
Sure.
you talk, the more questions that, happen, but we're going to have to move on to our United Way partners to hear from them, but you can stay on and we'll bring you back for some additional questions because I know our United Way partners may have some questions as well. But thank you. Excellent conversation. Okay, I am going to invite our United Way partners to share a little bit. They're going to take each 5 minutes to share a little bit about their local context and also how they are communicating effectively to their stakeholders and what messaging are they using that they find effective right now. Also share a little bit about what their current reality is, any pivots that they've made recently to make certain that they're reaching their target audiences effectively. And then also if there are any reflections on Laurel's presentation, as well as any questions they may have for her. So up first is Michael. He is based in Central Ohio, and I'd like to welcome you, Michael, to start us off on this part of the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marjorie. And I certainly would like to start with some community context. So as just mentioned, United Way of Central Ohio is based in Columbus. We operate just in a single county of Franklin County, which has about 1.3 million residents and has been growing quite rapidly. Last year, the county added about 17,000 additional residents. What I'd like to jump in with Laurel is how much of the lack of local media coverage and the lack of things being fact-based has really played in with how United Way communicates with the broader community. I think it is safe to say that it is true in many communities. Everybody knows the United Way brand. They don't necessarily know exactly what United Way does, but they understand that United Way helps people and has been around for a century. That is definitely true for this community. What we have found is that many of our partners are really struggling on how they individually as nonprofit partners or community partners are able to achieve greater impact in the community, because I don't believe they fully understand the community change that is really the underpinnings of how they're struggling. We moved to a new business model July of last year. It is entirely focused on success by third grade. That means all of our funded partners operate within 6 of our 16 school districts. They are focused on the Alice population and below. Those 6 school districts are about half of the county's population, but comprise most of the Alice and families in poverty. What they're really struggling with is the lack of housing affordability and how that housing affordability is really impacting the communities and families that we serve. Evictions are at an all-time high. Unsheltered homelessness is an all-time high. The amount of housing turnover is at an all-time high. And the lack of the ability to build more housing to accommodate the growth of the region has not only impacted everybody, but it is mostly impacting low-income communities. As an example, rents in low-income neighborhoods are rising at the fastest. In moderate-income neighborhoods, rents are going up moderately so, and in the wealthier parts of our community, rents are going up at the slowest rate. So when it comes to our community partners, the city, county, the corporations that help United Way's raise funding, the boards of the organizations that we fund, and the staff that work at those organizations, we've curated community knowledge presentations that explain this is how the city is growing, this is how the demographics are shifting, this is what's happening in the housing market, and how certain neighborhoods and communities are being hit by that. Oftentimes we'll get a request that says, can United Way come and give a 5-minute, 10-minute overview of how these community trends are impacting families? We usually say no. That needs 45 minutes. That needs an hour. And if you want to go deep in different pieces of spaces, we will go very deep and do a training with you. We have found that it has been more effective to go very deep with our current funded partners, corporate partners, and others, including Rotaries and Civics and Kiwanis, the realtor groups, to get that time where we are invited in to explain this is the community in which United Way finds itself operating, and these are the challenges in which those organizations are struggling to get greater impact, is a very deep and rich conversation. Yes, we will organize those conversations slightly differently between board, donors, policymakers, and the nonprofits, but the narrative is always the same. And that is, you first need to understand the community. United Way is a century-long community-based organization. We know the community's data trends. And if we come out and explain to you, this is the community we now share, this is how it is changing, these are the needs of the families we care about, then we can come back in and talk about the work of United Way. But before we can get into that work of United Way, you need to understand the community context. And that is where we have found great success. And I will pause there and let the next panelist introduce themselves and their work.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I really appreciate your sharing the importance of understanding the community context and focusing on deep education, which, emphasizes some of the comments that Laurel made. So thank you so much. So Nalisha Henry, welcome. Nalisha is based in Greenville, South Carolina. So we're going south and would love to hear about your community context and effective communication strategies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marjorie, and thank you to the team at Ascend and Center for Grade Level Reading around bringing kind of me and my peers together to really talk about the work across the network. One thing we often say is if you've met one United Way, you've met one United Way. And so being able to get this really broad understanding of how we in our respective communities really navigate the complexities that is both hyper-local and hyper-global in the network. So here in Greenville, we are a community that is honestly booming. Our population right now of about 560,000 people. We're geographically kind of halfway point between Atlanta and Charlotte, and relatively low cost of living, close to the mountains, close to the beach, and really great place to be and live and work and play. And so what we have seen is this really significant population growth. We're expecting about 240,000 people to come into our community by the year 2040, which would bring us close to 750,000 people in our community over really a 30-year span of growth, and that's being pretty generous. So with that comes really new evolutions of what United Way's work needs to be, how we communicate and who we're communicating to around our impact and the work we want to see. Very similar to Michael, who I've had a chance to talk to about the issues they're facing, because we're very similar in the scope and size of our work as well, is we're seeing increased unsheltered homelessness, increased stretches or pushes on the kind of housing ecosystem, both in our community. What we also see is what I call the tale of two cities. In many ways, we're thriving, we're booming. We've come from, for the last generation, a community that has been very textile centric and really textile focused as a key industry, moving more towards tech manufacturing. For instance, Michelin North America is headquartered here. BMW is right up the road, as well as Tesla building a distribution center here, to a community that is also really taxed with dealing with things like tourism as an industry, which has not been the case. And so with that, one of the things that we are building really a narrative and honestly a counter narrative around in our community is that we have to have growth that is inclusive and economic inclusivity versus exclusivity. That growth has to be in our community, and that prosperity in our community has to be shared across all of our community. And that is not what we're seeing here in Greenville. What we also are building a counter narrative around is the impact of poverty, and that it is less individualistic and more systemic. And so with that work, we've done some significant work around what we call mental models and how we start to really inform people of who really is experiencing poverty. Michael referred to ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. And essentially, close to half of our population is experiencing financial hardship in comparison to decreased poverty levels, but more people experiencing financial hardship because they're not making enough to make ends meet with the rising costs and the cost of living here in Greenville. And so that is really how we're working to inform people. Alice data, I say data by design, has worked for us. We're one of the hardest places to move out of poverty. And so understanding that and sharing that data and statistics, if you're born in the bottom quintile, you have about a 4.7% chance of moving to the top quintile in our community specifically. That gets even worse as we go across racial and ethnic lines. And so really naming the kind of narrative that currently exists, building the counter narrative around that, and then starting to inform people around that. We've done a variety of things with bringing in national speakers. Last year, we brought in Matthew Desmond, who wrote Poverty by America, as really United Way serving as a thought leader around what are the causes of poverty and who's benefiting from poverty, and serving in that way as a leader. So happy to pause there as we move on to the next panelist as well.
Thank you so much, and deeply appreciate that you really shared how you're using data, not the current data, but the projected data around your population growth to inform your messaging and your communication. So really appreciate that. And now we're going to turn to Chris, who is in South Central Michigan, and would love to hear about your context, how you're using effective messaging and data, and then also if you have any reflections on Laurel's comments or questions for her. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Good afternoon from wherever you are. Maybe it's still morning there. Appreciate the opportunity to jump on and share a few perspectives. And similar to my previous colleagues, we use ALICE as the data platform in Michigan. I think there's now 30-some states across the U.S. Many of the United Ways in those states are using the ALICE data, really talk about those struggling to make ends meet or living below the federal poverty level. For us, it's 4 in 10 households in Michigan, and in some of our urban centers and some of our rural areas, it's as high as 50, 60, 70%. So similarly, we find disparate data across our 6 counties that we serve in South Central and Southwest Michigan. A couple of things that I would just lift up, and part of what I know we're talking about today is how do we use data, but I know Laurel talked about kind of the values and some of the communication. We lead with our values in everything that we do. And I think right now, especially in the environments in which we're operating in, that's critically important to our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are changing, quite honestly. United Way for us in our history has been really about, most individuals who can give to United Way. We're supporting us corporately through our workplace campaigns. We talked about everybody being a potential donor. We tried to stay away from any issue that might be seen as divisive or controversial or uncomfortable. And I'm happy to say that in the last 10 to 15 years, we've really shifted to be really focused on the values that drive all of our decision making. Equity being first and foremost. So we talk openly about equity, diversity, and inclusion. We talk about it more now than we ever have, including doing something a couple of times a year, a 21-day equity challenge. And while I want to talk about the data and I want to talk about some of the ways in which we impact community, I think this is a moment by which our values have to define us. And in simple perspective, when you look at the core definition of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we talk about it that way because we lead with equity as the value. It's really about the practice, right? It's about the practice of creating space, recognizing there are disparities in marginalized communities, recognizing that currently our BIPOC, our LGBTQIA+, our immigrant and refugee communities are under attack. It's the simplest way that I can put it. And we have a responsibility. I have a personal and professional responsibility. We have a responsibility as an organization. We have privilege and influence as a part of that responsibility. We're not naive to that. And I realize not everybody is in that position to really get comfortable about bringing people to the table to learn, grow, and understand together, and not let these words and values be divisive, because they're being used in that way. And these are good words. These are words that matter to the communities that we serve and support. And so the data and the ALICE information is important and drives our decision-making. In addition to our vision and mission, we have something that we call our path that you can find on our website at united4scmi.org that really talks about our sole focus is to reduce and eliminating economic, the ALICE data, and racial disparities. So from that platform then, the work that we do, the investments that we make in nonprofit organizations, some of you might be on the call that we support in education, basic needs, financial stability, is really driven by that data and those values and the outcomes that we're trying to improve around the economic and racial disparities. And so I could go on, but I think I'm actually just going to stop there because I think that's what's important. And I know a number of my colleagues on this call think about those values that drive those decisions as well. So
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that you centered on your values and what is driving your communications currently. That's really important. I think that's connected to what Laurel said as well, is about centering on values and values-based leadership. So thank you for that, and look forward to engaging you in the Q&A. So Larry, he is based in Rhode Island now, but was formerly in Michigan, right? No? Okay, I thought you were formerly in Michigan, but please share with us your context and how you're thinking about effective communications.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of this conversation alongside my esteemed co-panelists. I'm with United Way of Rhode Island, which is in southern New England, nudged in between eastern Connecticut and the southeastern Massachusetts area. We have a population of about 1.1 million residents spread across 5 counties, a mix of urban, suburban, and rural settings. We are one of 2 states that have only a single local United Way serving the entire state, the other being Delaware. And so in Rhode Island, United Way of Rhode Island is also home of our statewide 211 information and referral helpline, We're home of the Aging and Disability Resource Center. We do grant making, policy and advocacy, and then have a just over 1-year-old Alliance for Nonprofit Impact, which is serving as the state's nonprofit resource center. Some of the ways that we communicate about the needs that we're seeing, the impact that we're having or striving for, we use a variety of strategies. And so some people want to read the information, some people want to hear about it and talk about it. So we use a mix of in-person meetings, events, convenings, data reports, sector level data, disaggregated data, and grantee level insights as well. And through these various strategies, our hope is to show how our work and the issues that we're tackling are relevant to every Rhode Islander. And for example, 211 may be looked at as a service that's only needed by those people, whether they're ALICE populations or otherwise. However, 211 is the front door to social services for a wide variety of needs. It could be a resource that helps you find a summer program, to free income tax preparation, to absolutely be a lifeline to someone who's experiencing homelessness and looking for shelter. Some of the other ways that we try to frame the importance of the topics that we're working on and the data that we're seeing, if you look at topics like housing and education, we think about not only the challenges that we're facing, whether it's grade level reading or disparities therein, or housing cost burden. We look at what's the implications for now, but also what's the opportunity cost for not addressing these issues. And so what are the implications if we have poor or less than optimal education outcomes or housing affordability for the workforce, both pipeline and incumbent? How does housing availability and affordability impact cost burden renters and homeowners, as well as the ability to attract and grow businesses in Rhode Island? And so framing it not just at the individual resident level, but also at the sector level and the state level as well. Some of the specific ways that we're talking about data and what's effective varies on the audience. Some people care about what we did and how much did we do. So thinking about the activities, if you think through a logic model lens, people want to know how much did you do? Others want to know what was our reach, who did we serve, more oriented towards outputs. A lot of people are interested in what changed, what was the difference, what was the United Way difference? And so thinking about what outcomes were we able to move, or are we in the process of moving? And that could be inclusive, but not limited to changes in knowledge, skills, attitude, behavior, and status. And we look at outcomes at the individual resident level, at the nonprofit organization level, and at the community or sector level as well. And then I'll wind down, but internally, we are asking ourselves questions that are informed not just by quantitative data, but qualitative data, going back to some of what Laurel has shared. And so in addition to what the numerical data are telling us, what are the narratives and the stories that we're hearing telling us? And we use that in concert with other sources and touch points to build trust. And that, I know Laurel spent a lot of time talking about trust as well. We think about it from the perspective of we can only move at the speed of trust when whether it's with our communities that we're partnering with, or government agencies, or state leaders, or peer funders. And so using data, qualitative and quantitative, to tell the story of need, the story of opportunity, and to help establish trust and build trust is a key dimension of our work as well.
Thank you, Larry. And recognizing appreciation for the fact that you brought in framing and how to think about not just the individual aspects of this, but the systems aspects at the state and local level. Very, very important. So thank you. And now we will move to Todd, who is in Southeast Louisiana. So Todd, welcome.
Thank you. And I have to apologize in advance. We are in the middle of a thunderstorm, so you may hear some thunder and lightning in the background. Yes, I'm Todd Battiste. I serve as Senior Vice President for Education and Youth Initiatives at United Way of Southeast Louisiana. I'm proud to serve along so many of you who are working relentless to ensure all children, regardless of background or zip code, are reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. In New Orleans, our campaign for grade level reading is more than an initiative. It's a movement. And like many movements, it requires intention, unity, and the right tools to help us get from vision to impact. That's why we built our work on what we call the collective caring framework, a model grounded in equity, accountability, and love. We believe that if we are to build a future where all children thrive, our system must be a human-centered, and our messaging must reflect both the truth of the challenge and the hope that lives in our community. We often hear sobering statistics. Nearly 80% of economically disadvantaged students in New Orleans are not reading on grade level by the end of third grade. That's a call to action, but it's not the whole story. If we only tell the story of what's broken, we miss the opportunity to elevate what's possible. Our city is a tapestry of strength, filled with families, educators, and neighborhoods with rich history, culture, and resilience. Our messaging must hold that tension, honoring the urgency while uplifting the assets. That's why our communication strategy is designed not just to inform, but to inspire, to help every stakeholder see themselves as a part of the solution. We don't do messaging just for the sake of public relations. We do it for public purpose, because storytelling is a strategy. It shapes perception, it fuels movements, and it opens the door for policy, funding, and the collective action. One of the most powerful ways we've ground our messages is in data, both institutional and lived data. We're developing a NOLA data hub, not just as a dashboard of metrics, but as a tool to align, activate, and advocate. Yes, we track indicators like chronic absenteeism, reading proficiencies, and access to high-quality care. But we also evaluate community narratives, because data divorced from the humanity doesn't drive change. Take our father engagement assessment, for example. It wasn't just a survey. It was an invitation to reimagine family engagement and to help us co-create educational tools and strategies that affirm fathers as critical partners in their child's development. Or our collaboration with the Mardi Gras crew, Mystic Crew of Femme Fatale, where we embedded messaging about literacy and parenting into New Orleans' cultural fabric. That's what community-rooted, data-informed messaging looks like. Every audience we engage brings a different lens, so our messages is never one size fit all. It's audience-centered and action-oriented. For policymakers and funders, we highlight the return on investment, how literacy affects the workforce readiness, economic mobility, and public health. For families, we create tools that are practical and affirming, like bilingual reading guides and milestone checklists that validate their role as first teacher. For employers in our hospitality and first responders childcare consortium, we use employee data to underscore how childcare access affects hiring, retention, and economic recovery. In every case, we ask, what story does the data help us tell? And how can that story activate hearts, minds, and our community? We're not just planning, we're doing. Our educational toolkit working group is rolling out a parent-friendly, culturally responsive literacy toolkit that integrates reading, STEM, and social-emotional learning. It's co-designed with the community, because we don't build for families, we build with them. Meanwhile, our advocacy and awareness working group is preparing a campaign that shifts how we talk about reading, less as a task and more as a lifestyle. Whether it's in a second line, a street mural, or a Sunday dinner, we want families to see reading as something joyful and essential. We've also leveraged data in influencing policy. Our work through the Ready Louisiana Coalition helped push the state towards $200 million in early childhood investment. That just didn't happen by accident. It happened because message matched the moment. At the heart of all of our principles is the simple truth. Literacy is about more than reading. It's about belonging. It's about wellness, opportunity, dignity, and freedom. Our collective caring framework reminds us that systematic change starts with empathy. When we lead with care, center community voice, and ground our messages in real stories and real data, we unlock new levels of possibility. So I invite each of you to consider how we use data to tell a fuller story, how we make space for the truth and hope to coexist in our messaging, and how we invite our communities not just to witness change, but to co-create it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd. And you had so many pearls in your presentation and nuggets to lift up. I especially love that you said both that your communications is human-centered, but it's also audience-centered, and that you're striving to make certain that people are inspired. So thank you so much for that. Now I'd like to invite Ayeola into the conversation. Ayeola, you sit in such an important role supporting United Ways globally in the United States, and would love to know how you're thinking about this moment in time around communications, effective communications, and any thoughts, comments you have about Laurel's presentation as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marjorie. And it's great to be with all of you this morning or this afternoon, wherever you find yourself. And I just want to say thank you and send my appreciation and gratitude to my colleagues out in the network, the voices that you heard on the call today. So I'm going to pull back the lens a little bit to ground those of you who may not be familiar with United Way. United Way is a global force for community change. You've heard from 5 United Ways today. We are comprised of over 1,000 United Ways in 36 countries. You've heard from leaders today that reflect some of that diversity in terms of communities and regions served. But I'm going to pull on some of the threads that you heard echoed throughout all of their reflections. And I'm going to start where Chris started, which is, being grounded in our mission, our vision, our values. While the world is changing around us, we are committed and remain committed to our mission, our vision, and our values. It's important for our credibility, and it's important for consistency in how we show up in the communities we serve. Our mission for United Way is to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. Our vision is we envision a world where everyone is thriving. And for us, that means strengthening communities. That means advancing health, opportunity for young people, and financial well-being for everyone, working towards a future where everybody has the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. And our values, we value diversity, and we strive to advance equity, inclusion, and access for all. So it starts there and it remains there. That's what brings us back and centers and grounds us in terms of our work and how we show up. And when we talk about equity, we mean the intentional inclusion of everyone in society. Our approach to community impact is grounded in equity. And I often say that when you're doing community impact effectively, you're leading with equity. And what does that mean? You heard it today, that it means leveraging and leading with data to deeply understand community issues, to understand who is most impacted by them, to engage residents in our communities, to understand their unique lived experience, and to understand what they see as possible solutions to those challenges, to convene across sector to create shared aspirations, common goals, and to develop strategies that address those needs and challenges. And you also heard, particularly in Todd's last remarks, yes, that includes addressing direct service needs, but it also includes policy and advocacy to create more systemic solutions. And that's going to be truly important in terms of how we put equity into practice. It also means being outcomes focused. and making strategic investments to address this. So years ago, about 5 years ago, we developed an equity framework that spoke to all of those 6 levers and how working in that way, in that concerted way through our impact approach, is leading with equity. Over half of our United Ways have community impact agendas. And that's a fancy way of saying that our United Ways are deeply attuned to their communities. And so they have created goals, strategies, and outcomes that they are working on with community leaders across sectors to achieve on behalf of all the residents they serve. But it's deeply, deeply grounded and rooted in that knowledge of community and meeting communities we serve where they are. And that means understanding how people are differently situated. We don't have a level playing ground. People are differently situated in terms of their access to opportunities, to resources, to networks and supports. And the only way to achieve the shared goals that we establish for the communities we serve is to ensure that we are serving everyone, including those who are furthest from the goal, and using data to understand that. United Ways in our network understand the importance of awareness raising. It is the 3rd most common strategy that United Ways are using to advance equity, and do this regularly in our approach. So you heard our leaders and colleagues talking about engaging donors, board members. We engage elected officials, community members, and we do that leveraging a variety of platforms. So that includes the platforms that Laurel talked about, but it also includes focus groups, community conversations, one-on-one conversations to create that influence and to educate and build awareness that we also need to tap into that human connection, as well as the digital and social media strategies that are at our disposal. But what we say also matters. So it's not only the mechanisms that we use, the stakeholders we need to reach, but what are we saying to them? And for us, we need to always start with the data, both in terms of understanding the issues and the needs, but also that aspiration. You have to create in people an aspiration for how things could be different. And what do we all want to be true for the people we love? And so we have to convey that in terms of that change is possible, that we can change community conditions to meet the needs for the greatest number of people. So we have to share that aggregate data. And the good news for our network is that we collect that data and we have that data to stand on, but we can't stop there. And you also heard that we have to personalize that data in the form of stories that put people in a broader context. People live in families, they live in communities, they live in society. And so we must always be, especially because we're such a highly individualized culture, we always have to contextualize the people we serve. And conveying, I think when it comes to equity, it's conveying that a rising boat lifts all tides, that the work to advance equity is not about winners and losers. It is about creating conditions that ultimately help everybody. And this is where I think we have more work to do to create that shared notion of that notion of a shared versus individual prosperity. We can have shared prosperity. And so I'll wrap up by saying that we have to be equal to the challenges that we are facing in creating those clear, consistent, and compelling messages that are cognizant of the culture in which we swim, but also go beyond that and paint a positive vision of a future that in many ways we have yet to realize. So aspiration is really about creating belief in a future that we can't yet see. And so I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, Marjorie.
Thank you so much, Ayeola, and really helpful to hear how United Way Worldwide continues to be very, very focused on making certain that community voice, the voices of families is centered in the work, and you're using data pretty strongly to support, your network and ways to do that. So thank you. So I'm going to invite all of our panelists, all of our speakers to come back on camera. And I'm going to ask, a final question. I think a lot of the questions that were in the Q&A have been responded to, but a final question, and that is, and I'll call on each of you, what matters most in your work, in your community, when communicating? What matters most to you? And I will start with Nalisha.
Yeah, thank you for that, Marjorie. Something that Todd shared to me is really relevant in community and in the United Way Network around having messaging that meets the moment. I think one of the strengths of United Way is that our local United Way has been around 103 years, right? So there is this deep, really institutional trust and community of United Way being that constant. We've been through many changing tides, right, over the course of 103 years, and we've weathered each one of them, right? And so United Way is really being able to step into that and have messaging that meets the moment. And I think what has been really, really a constant in that is also not just messaging during difficult times, but also messaging around difficult issues, right? And how do we name it? How do we name it and with the intent to create solutions around it, right? And so, and it does not hurt to have a tagline that says "Live United." So it's been really this evergreen messaging, right, that we can use. And for us, we also use locally stronger United. And so what I've seen United Ways do over time, and especially over the last few years, is around stepping up in times of community crisis, whether it's natural disasters or man-made disasters, and being able to lean on Live United, right? Strong United. We will be that trusted messenger in the community. We will be that constant. And it allows people to continue to listen to us when there are times when we're not in crisis, right? And so being able to be that constant, I think, has been what I've seen across the network, and especially we've leaned into recently as we, stepped up and did crisis response in both COVID and during Hurricane Helene, right? And so I think those are really, really just important elements that, to me, speaks out in the shared conversation we've had.
Wonderful, thank you. And United Ways truly are those anchor community organizations that do have that trust. Michael, may I ask you to share reflections on this question?
Yes, I think I'm going to answer it with 4 ways where I think that we have been very successful in communicating this current moment in time. And that is, take a topic people think they know, community conditions, provide them a different lens on where they live, provide new information, and leave the person wanting more. If you can do those 4 things in a community conversation, it has been very, very successful. There is such an absence of knowledge about what is really going on across our communities. It is so complicated, it's so nuanced and layered. Even people who think they're in the know don't really understand the community. If United Way can serve as the connector and the educator about community conditions, then they already know. We know how to read grant applications and allocate resources. They first need to know that we know our community, and that's where I think we've gotten great success. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Chris, may I call on you?
Yeah, I don't want to follow those 2 because that was fantastic. They were spot on. Well done, colleagues. Appreciate that. I think I'll shorten my reflection this way. We're in a moment. You've heard us talk about that. And while this is hugely impactful on the children and families we care about, sometimes we get wrapped into the data, we get wrapped into the strategies, the impact, the outcomes. I don't know what other word I could use for the nonprofit sector that talks about the great things that we do. These are real people. These are families. These are kids that we care about. These are my grandkids, our families in our community. And I think just coming back to, I saw it in the chat, that human-centered, our humanity approach really matters in everything that we communicate. Make it real. Don't make it a statistic alone, although those are important. And really think about the fact that for United Ways, we're really nonpartisan. So we'll survive this moment. It won't be easy. we'll have to be together. We'll have to support one another and lift up those who are most impacted. I think that's what's really important for us and for our network, and really for the nonprofit sector that we all, lead and put our passion and our interest in.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Larry, may I call on you?
Sure. I would say it's important for us to honor the unique experience and perspective of every individual that we're connecting with. Some of that speaks to the clear and accurate description of equity that Ayeola was talking through, but also thinking about when we present data, the importance of having disaggregated data and understanding that there may be a top level number, but there's also some nuance in what different people of different identities, experiences, or geographies are experiencing, and being mindful of that in both the analysis and the storytelling, and then also making sure that people see themselves in the work that we're doing, the stories that we're telling, the imagery that we're using, the word choice, the platforms where we're putting information or not putting information, who we're highlighting or not. So all of those ways of being inclusive in how we're representing and standing with community, and not taking license away from people to tell their own story and narrative.
So I would like to now call on Todd.
I think if I'm going to ask the question correctly, can you rephrase the question or share it with me
Sure.
again?
The question is what is most important to you in your communications in this moment and for your community?
Well, I think I'd build off what my other colleagues have said. For me, what's most important right now is to be the voice for children who can't speak for themselves. Oftentimes we have a benefit of engaging with adults, but how do those adults really articulate what children feel? So I really try to center our work around being the voice for little people who can't actually speak for themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Laurel, and then we'll close out with Ayeola. Laurel.
So many good things have already been said. I think the one that I keep coming back to is that we try to focus on messaging that moves policymakers to do something different, to do something better, that moves people towards one another, that moves people to action in their individual lives for their communities. And so we're always sort of looking at, what is that framework? What is that language? What are those words that will actually move people? And for me, I think that that's how we think about success. It's really knowing our audience, both the audience that we have and the audience that we want, and then understanding through data and research and all of that, what will actually move them, and then coming up with messaging that does that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ayeola, would you like to close out the panel, please?
I mean, how do you come behind all of those words of wisdom? I'll just echo and say that it's trust, it's authenticity, it is consistency, and follow through. Showing up in good and bad times and following through on what you say that you're going to do. I think that matters a lot. And so I think United Ways continue to do that. We are the epitome of be, do, say. And I think that is what matters most to ensure that your messages are, the messenger matters. So to ensure that your messages are received, you show up, you honor your commitments, you're authentic in how you convey your messages, and you authentically represent the voice of the people you are there to serve, and create opportunity for them, create platforms for them to also share their voices, because that's what we have to do. And we have a platform that enables us to do that, to create that space where others have a voice.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And really wonderful to be able to close out on that message around, just leadership, that we all have a platform. You all have been an amazing, amazing panel. And I thank you, Chris, Larry, Michael, Todd, Nalisha, It's been really wonderful to be able to support you and platform you here. It's been an honor for me to have a really esteemed colleague, Laurel, participate today. So thank you for that, Laurel. And then always great appreciation to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and United Way Worldwide as partners in this work. It's been really an honor to be able to do that. And thank you for the audience for your great questions. I hope that you've gotten lots of resources and, follow up with us if you have any additional specific questions. Now I'll turn it over to Bonnie. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, great. Listen, I think Marjorie's done a great job of all the thank yous. I just want to say again, thanks to Marjorie and Ayeola for their partnership in actually creating these conversations that we're having. And again, to all of the amazing panelists and United Way leaders who are with us today, sharing insight, wisdom, and guidance for us. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And I think in spite of the headwinds, or perhaps maybe because of the headwinds, let's continue to build off the good work that we know is taking place in communities across the country. We have a good impact story to tell. Let's keep telling it. Everybody have a great day. Thanks.